Hey, everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon, whether you're listening on the podcast or watching here on YouTube. Today, we have a special guest, a very good friend of the channel, a friend and colleague, Exo Academian. So welcome, Exo.
Hey, James, good to be here. Good to be here in person.
Oh, my God, right? Look,
yes.
Everybody, behold. It's
He's
crazy.
Not an alien, after all.
Again, I always say that's not completely true yet. We don't know that for sure just because we can see you.
Right.
So it's great to have you on, Exo, and it's great to actually see you. So people here on the channel may be familiar with you. You're Exo Academian. You have a podcast and a YouTube channel. But now, you're here. You're showing your face. You're kind of in the public sphere now, to a degree.
Right.
Why are you choosing to kind of step out of the shadows a little?
Well, I think a couple different reasons. One, I've been involved in some different things more publicly in terms of joining with some people to do some different projects and whatnot. So the number of people who actually know who I am and what I look like has been increasing. And as that's gone okay, it's been fine. I've sort of been letting my guard down a bit more. Initially, just being kind of introverted, I was happy to be fairly anonymous and just sort of let the content speak for itself. But I also recognize that people kind of like the human connection. They like to know who the person is, what they look like, what are their mannerisms like. So over time, talking to some different people, just kind of encouraging it, I decided why not? So here I am in person. Started with me posting a photo like a week ago on Twitter and Facebook, and then here I am, first time on video.
Yeah, and it's great. And I've been talking to you for I don't know, it's been a little while now, and it's funny to actually to see you when I talk and see the animation. It's really cool, actually.
Yeah,
and
just so everybody knows, this is the first time James has actually seen me live in motion as well. So
yeah, I'm used to seeing I've seen that one picture or in the other picture.
Right.
But and I'm glad that you're kind of doing your video debut here on Engaging the Phenomenon. I think that's really awesome. So thank you.
No channel I'd rather do it on, James. So I'm glad to be here. Very cool.
Thanks. So people are going to be aware, and if they're not, now they are, that you were recently involved in an event that had to do with human-initiated contact or consciousness and UFOs. So some people might not be familiar with the background, but can you explain to people maybe the name of the event and what it was?
Yeah, the name of the event was UFOs and the Consciousness Connection, which, if for those of you familiar with my channel and even what James does, that's right up my alley. Not only focusing in on UFOs, but specifically the consciousness connection. And it's partly through you, James, that a network of people kind of heard about me and got a hold of me and invited me to this event. It was kind of like an invite only kind of event. People that are kind of well known in the field, both people who have like a military background or government background, kind of studying this kind of thing, as well as people who are experiencers and researchers. So it was a really great group of people, about 19 different people, which I'd say is about as large as you want it to be. As you know, it kind of, the numbers can impact what ends up happening. So that's about as large as I would ever want it. But yeah, people with different expertise and different, elements of the overall field, like consciousness. Some people more on that side, some people more on the psi side, some people more on the, the HEIS or CE5 side. Some people who are just really great researchers, some people who've been documenting with video cameras. So there was a diverse group of people, and we came together to basically try to make contact and to use a bunch of different techniques, not just HEIS and CE5 protocols, but also things like astral projection. We worked on some psi techniques amongst the group, just really trying to tune up our ability to expand our consciousness and make contact. And that's what we tried to do.
Yeah. And can you say where the event was held?
I can. Since it's come out elsewhere, I'm happy to say now. It was at the Monroe Institute, kind of the famous location that Bob Monroe set up back in the 70s. that's well known for its astral projection programs that people are part of. And it's funny because I did a podcast episode a few months ago about using astral projection to make contact with the others. So it was really interesting how a few months later, serendipitously, it ended up happening that I ended up being at Monroe and at the Monroe Institute and doing this on that campus, which was really, an amazing opportunity to be there for the first time for me. And so in addition to CE5 and heist protocols that we kind of did together in a big meadow at night, we also various times during the day and at night would go into our little cubicles. For those who are not familiar at Monroe, they have these little cubicles that you climb into, totally blacked out. You can't see anything, can't see the hand in front of your face kind of thing. And you either listen to headphones or they pump in through these speakers that are in the walls, these different, binaural kind of pieces they put together, a couple of which were specifically designed for this group to try and sort of tune us up, increase the likelihood that we would expand our consciousness and make contact. So it was great that the people that put it together got a hold of the Monroe Institute. It's very rare for them to allow a private group to come in basically and host an event there, because this was not a Monroe event. It was a private event hosted at the Monroe Institute. So that's what ended up happening. And it was an amazing experience for sure.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. And that's, you're referencing some of the hemisync technology, which is some people may be familiar with it. You can, utilize basically as a form of like modern technology to, enhance cognitive function or even psychic phenomenon, concentration, a number of different things.
Right.
Can you discuss who was at the event?
I can mention some names only because I know that these names have come out elsewhere. So I'm comfortable saying Chris Bledsoe was there, was, a real prime experiencer, or as, Joe Burks would say, a prime contactee extraordinaire. John Alexander was there, the retired colonel. Joe McMonagle was there. He spoke to us and we got a chance to talk to him, just talking about remote viewing and his career and what he's learned about that and psi. That was an amazing experience. Sean Cahill was there as well. Sean Esborn Hargens was there. He's put together an amazing Exo studies program, both a master's and a PhD program. And he came and he also talked to us about his program. And he and I have a very similar approach in terms of this multifaceted approach to the phenomenon, and numerous groups and numerous origin sources being involved. So it was great to touch base with him. He was there. Rob Freeman was there. He was our sort of chief camera person, brought his huge, assortment of cameras, documenting everything. And if you go to his channel, you can see some of the events that we took part of and some of the things that happened and we captured. Sean McNamara was another person there who's done a lot of work with consciousness. And he actually spoke to the group as well about some psi phenomena stuff and telepathy and clairvoyance. So it was really great to, my podcast is called Point of Convergence. It's about the overlap between the different contact modalities, how the psi phenomena and how near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and astral projection and contact with alien intelligence, how it's all connected. And that's why this event was so perfect for me, because we were basically trying to push all these modalities at the same time, or as much as we could, to try to increase the likelihood that we would both expand our consciousness as a group in that kind of we space, and then also aim to make contact. So that's what happened. And that's some of the names that were involved. There's some other names too, like I said, 19 people, but that gives you some of the names that I know have already come out. So I'm comfortable saying that they were there.
Yeah. It has been speculation before, but it's great to hear more about kind of the event and who was there and kind of what was going on. And you actually did a great podcast episode that before a lot of this information was out, you had talked about this event. But for the listeners here, can you kind of give a rundown, maybe like from when you got to the event to when you ended the event, something like a summary,
right?
Of kind of how the event went.
Right. So it was over several days and several nights at Monroe Institute, and During the daytime, we would do a combination of things. Different people would speak. I got to speak to the group on the Sunday morning and talked about an experience that I had in my past, and then just sort of my perspective on the phenomenon and how different elements are related. I talked about expanding our consciousness, trying to basically take the executive ego offline in order to expand our consciousness. I got to speak about that in different ways that I've tried to do that through meditation, through lucid dreaming, through things like the heist protocols. So we had during the daytime, different people would speak. John Alexander spoke, Joe McMonagle spoke, like I said, Sean Asborg-Hargens spoke, and sort of addressed the group basically on their different specialties, the different expertise, different ones of us brought to the table kind of thing. So we could all increase our understanding. We also did some practical work, like, trying different techniques, like spoon bending, for instance. We did that one night. The telepathy thing, the remote viewing thing, we did that as well. Also did some of the astral projection things using the technologies they have there at Monroe, which, by the way, I would say that it's one thing to, listen to a binaural kind of audio thing on YouTube or something, which is great. But to do it, at the Monroe Institute and have some of these programs specifically designed, some of these audio programs specifically for us, and be able to do it all at the same time. So we're retiring to our cubicles. And when we're in our cubicles, we're all getting the same audio signals being put in at the same time. And we would even, astrally project, imagine ourselves sort of rejoining out in the meadow prior to when we're going to do the CE5/heist protocols. So again, really upping the game in terms of really trying to bring all these modalities together. So that happened during the daytime. And then at night, of course, is when the sky watching happened. We would gather together in a meadow in a big semicircle kind of thing, brought out these recliner chairs and, sleeping bags and blankets to keep warm into the night kind of thing. Because it's up in the Blue Ridge Mountains where I am, even though it's in Virginia. And we basically would film stuff the entire time. We would have our eyes out for things. Because we had experts there who are very familiar with what's in the sky, we knew what was a satellite likely. We knew when it was the International Space Station coming over. We knew when it was a meteor or a planet or a star. So we sort of tried to eliminate those things so that when something did come over that was potentially anomalous, we could spot it. And we even had lasers to sort of highlight that, which you can see in some of the videos that have been published out there. And they ended up having some great experiences. And for me, that was an amazing experience, being together with the group, having a successful kind of high C5 experience. And we captured it on video and saw it together in a group. And then the next day we would, sort of debrief about what we saw, what we experienced. And another part that was really cool is that there were some of the staff there at Monroe had various other sensor systems and equipment, there as well, like random number generators, basically. So we're running experiments at the same time. So when these sightings happened, what showed up on the random number generator that was stationed on the side of the mountain, right? Or what happened when we all came together as a group and shared intentionality? What happened to the random number generator? And what's fascinating is, sure enough, consciousness impacted physical reality in terms of you would actually see a jump in the results in this random number generator. It would go non-random, to a really high degree, either when we came together and shared intentionality or when these objects or phenomena ended up showing up.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That sounds like an incredible event. And there's talk about possibly future events such like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like this was, the inaugural event. So we were sort of flying by the seat of our pants in some ways, just trying to throw some stuff together, try some stuff, see what worked. And even the second night, the third night, we would say, hey, we tried this the first night. Why don't we do this the second night, this the third night? Someone like Chris Bledsoe, who's a friend of mine, I know he's a friend of yours too, was able to sort of give more feedback to the group as the nights went on in terms of what to look for, what your focus can be. And I definitely paid attention to him because of his amazing experiences. He's developed this real intimate connection with some aspect of the phenomenon. And so I paid very close attention, and so did the group. And so he kind of spoke up more and more as the nights went on. And that, I think, really helped us tune in even more And for me personally, that just highlighted all the more how much the consciousness connection is central. It's not just about staring up in the sky at all. It really does matter about your intentionality and holding it with expectation throughout the night.
And kind of what you mentioned before about the little Monroe cubicle. That's, people will be familiar with Stranger Things, and like when 11 is getting in and doing the sensory deprivation, which is kind of like a little old school thing where they were actually experimenting with sensory deprivation decades ago to see if they could kind of get these results. And now kind of cool enough, if you have a place by you, there are sensory deprivation tanks now in different areas of the country. It won't be the same as the Monroe Institute, but if you want to get a taste of maybe something similar to that, you can go to a sensory deprivation tank and put binaurals on and maybe see if there's any result from that. Would be a cool
Absolutely.
experiment.
I mean, this is what's great about it. I mean, it was the first event, and yeah, we are planning to do other events in the future, but these are things people can do on their own. Absolutely. I mean, don't be taken aback by the star-studded cast or whatever. I mean, these are things everybody can do. It with all your years of experience with CE5. I mean, anybody can do this. It really is about just the focus, the intentionality, the dedication, and that's all it takes. And there's various techniques you can use, and it's all basically about expanding your consciousness, taking your usual executive ego, which is a very narrow focus, sort of putting that to sleep so that your expanded consciousness can come online. So things like separate sensory deprivation tanks help with that kind of thing. That's what happened at Monroe. But like you said, you can do that almost anywhere now.
Yeah, which is pretty fascinating. Is there anything from the event that you kind of walked away with as far as like, okay, I can kind of incorporate this into my practice, or if I go out and do another, heist human initiated contact event or experience or CE5, is there something like that you took away from that in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. I think we had one experience that I would like to share that I think will be interesting to people. And that is, there was one night where there was a bit of a, conversation going on around, should we be calling out when something's just a satellite, or just a meteor kind of thing, or should we not do that? And one of the things Chris Bledsoe really, propositioned for kind of thing, he lobbied for this, was that we not prematurely identify something, because even some of the people there who were coming more from the sort of scientific perspective admitted that there have been times where they have seen things tracking across the sky that look like a satellite based on their size, their behavior, how high up they appear to be, that kind of thing. But then suddenly they've had experiences where it'll stop, it'll shoot right back up into space, or it'll dart to the left or right. Clearly at that point, it's not a satellite. And so one of Chris's points was that, to hold the intentionality, to hold the expectation open, to hold almost like this channel open with these others, this consciousness connection, to keep it online, basically. Don't prematurely say, oh, that's a satellite, that's this, or that's that. Rather, just stay open and see what happens, kind of thing. And I definitely took that as a lesson. I think some other people who were coming at it more from the scientific perspective realize that you really do have to put the consciousness piece, right front and center. And then once it actually happens, then you can document it, then you can look at it scientifically, you can analyze it. But initially, the consciousness piece is central. So that's something I definitely took away. Another thing I would say is that these things don't necessarily, light up the entire sky. So it's like you do have to stay dedicated. You have to stay, on the first night, something showed up within half an hour of us getting out there. Other times it would be 3 or 4 hours later. Sometimes it would be well after midnight that something would show up, right? There was a couple of times where something showed up when half the group had already sort of retired for the night, kind of thing, because it was well into the early morning hours, kind of thing. We were filming the entire time, which was great. But it just shows you that you do have to be dedicated. It's not necessarily going to look like this massive display in the sky, pyrotechnics. It could be something like a flash that's in a very specific location that you just, when you look at it, how it's showing up, what it's doing, it's very clear it is anomalous. But if you're not paying attention, you could easily miss it as well. So that was a lesson I took away as well.
Yeah, people have this idea of what a UFO sighting should be, and you kind of have to drop that and just observe and see what the experience presents itself.
Exactly.
And for sure, I mean, the thing about judging, because I can't tell you how many times, especially in the last few years, where I had a thing where I would go out and I had already done my meditation inside, or I'm going to go out and I do a quick meditation, then I'm kind of in the field work zone, right? And I take a look at the sky, I see kind of the lay of the sky and where everything is, where the stars and planets are, and kind of get absorb my surroundings. And there's been a number of times when I'm doing that, and I'll see something and I'm like, okay, that's got to be a star because of where it is and how bright it is, and so on. And then I'll come back to it like 3 or 4 minutes later, and I'm like, there's something about that, and I'll think to it, right? Like it's and ask, right? Are you right, them or whatever? And it starts to move, right? And this object being stationary for several minutes. So, and that says a few things about the experience. It was already there when I came out, so it could basically stage the event because it was already there waiting. So that can tell you a few things about kind of the phenomenon and how some of the experiences can occur.
Right.
But is there anything from the event that you learned or experienced, something that you almost didn't expect, like something that was like, in retrospect?
I mean, there was quite a few. So number one, I would say that, and we were talking about this before we went on the air tonight. We were just talking about the importance of getting together with people and just the community connection, not just because it's not just about us connecting with the others, right? But it's about connecting with each other, and forming community and creating, again, what I would call we space, this unique bond that forms, this sort of resonance that forms when people gather together in some sort of dedicated purpose like this. So I think all of us that went to this event were changed by it. There are some people who even had like a long history, either in the military or in government circles, who or sort of pioneering independent researchers who said that their life was changed because of this event. It really, something about not just the intentionality, but coming together, feeling this sense of community in doing this, it changes you. And it makes you realize that you're not only connected to whatever is up there, but you're connected to each other. And somehow that's all part of the same thing. Some of those, some says something about the bedrock of reality and consciousness being primary. At least that's kind of been my working model for a while, but I came away all the more convinced of that, and I haven't talked much about this yet. I've talked, I mentioned to you briefly sort of privately, but for me personally, I feel like there's been some what you might call downloads since then, like since the event, just things that have occurred to me, kind of revelations that I've just woken up with them, and I don't know where they came from. It doesn't seem like it's coming from my usual thought process. So it seems like some sort of added element has been added to the mix, which has even, made me steer in certain directions in terms of the future and what I feel called to do. So like a vocation, a kind of calling. So that's been fascinating. And that didn't just happen with the event. It goes back sort of synchronistically several months. And again, it's been great knowing you these last several years, and a couple of the connections that I've made through you have really been central to that too. But sort of just recognizing, looking back several months, seeing this synchronistic kind of orchestration happening, which in some ways culminated in what happened at Monroe, but it's been continuing since then for me. And it's, changed my direction a little bit and what I plan to do in the future. That's one thing that was surprising to me. Another thing that was surprising was there was one experience we had, which, is unforgettable, where, again, just to be clear on this, there was a bit of a disagreement, or I wouldn't say heated conversation, but there were some differences of opinion around how we should approach it, what sort of protocol we should use, kind of thing, right? And there was a couple different perspectives in the group. At one point during the night, these three people that were having this conversation all sort of surrendered their ego, humbled themselves, apologized to each other, hugged it out, kind of thing. And in a moment immediately after that, something showed up in the sky.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, it's not a coincidence. The timing, like hours had gone by in between, right at the moment that these people made humbled themselves and connected, that opened some sort of channel again, or removed some sort of distortion or some sort of blockage consciously that allowed this to happen. And then these things showed up in the sky, these, blinking lights. And whether you want to say whatever that is, whoever they are, whether it's them affirming that sort of connection, that humility, or if it was just more like a channel that opened up because our consciousness got out of the way, our egos got out of the way. I don't know, but it was a fascinating experience and I won't forget that.
Yeah. And it's almost, again, it's like almost, it's almost as if the phenomenon is kind of like guiding or teaching in that sense. And that's part of the reason why, and again, what you were saying about coherence, how the group coherence is one of the most important things of the actual work. And this kind of thing with the phenomenon, that's why I say sometimes that the group work is actually more advanced in a way than like a solo CE5. So people that want to go out and initiate contact, some people will usually have a leaning, either more solo if they're introverted, or they feel more comfortable doing it in groups. But I think either way, the group dynamic is actually more advanced, and it's because of reasons like that. It comes to the point where you have to come together and have that realization, and then something will occur on that level.
Yeah, I agree. And it gives you pause to think about, who you have involved, and as you know, from years of experience with it, that there are times where people show up who either are skeptical or cynical, and sometimes that prevents anything from happening at all. So group coherence, that resonant field really does matter. Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason I was so excited about this event was because there was going to be, people like Chris there, again, a prime contactee. Joseph Burks would tell you that if you want to see things happen, then, associate yourself with prime contactees, because the phenomenon seems connected to them, right? And there's the whole, the hitchhiker effect is really interesting, because we often hear about that talked about in some negative terms, understandably.
Correct.
There have been some scary things happen to people, but I would say there's also a positive side to that too, where one of the people who organized this event, that really spearheaded it, had visited Chris Bledsoe, and like many people who visit Chris Bledsoe, had an amazing experience, and that gave him the impetus to want to even put on this event at Monroe and call together all these people. So again, you mentioned earlier about it's almost like the phenomenon is teaching or orchestrating. In some ways, you could say the entire impetus of this event, the catalyst for it, was the phenomenon in many ways. So that's fascinating too when I think back on it.
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, it's been noted that if you come into contact or proximity with maybe a prime contactee, as Dr. Joseph Burks would call it, or somebody who's highly gifted psychically, right, that there's almost kind of residue, even temporarily, where you kind of have a psychic boost for a short while, right, after being with them. And that's been noted. That happened to Dr. Burks himself when he was spending out time in the field with Dr. Stephen Greer in the early 90s, both with the contact on the psi, and then Dr. Burks found another prime contactee who I believe he called Nisha.
One from Russia, right?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
and had the same kind of observed the same experiences and which is fascinating. So you guys all, I'm sure, all collecting at that event got like an ultra boost from all the participants there.
Right. I mean, that's why I was excited, because I was aware of Joe Burke's theory about prime contactees. And so the combination of getting together with people like Chris Bledsoe, and also other people who are researchers and whatnot, just, and sort of bringing together all these different modalities and these different ways that we were going to express intentionality. And like you mentioned, not just heist and C5, but astral projection and, psi phenomena and telepathy and all these different things we tried to bring online together at the same time. But yeah, that's, again, on that Hitchhiker Effect, the person who put together the event, after he had visited Chris, he started seeing things back in his own house, different state. So it just shows you that, sure enough, that can happen in a positive way as well, that you, something happens to your consciousness and it stays with you, and then you can then have experiences after that.
Yeah, that's I think very important to note, because the negative aspect gets kind of highlighted a lot, and I understand why. Part of that could be also kind of for the for the means of communicating to the right people to investigate it, almost like a liability alarmist, kind of like, hey, we have to investigate this, but nonetheless, yeah, there's
just something else to add about that too, that while we're on this, James, like, some people, when they found out that I was going to do this, or they found out afterwards that I did this, they said, "Oh, you're brave, to go do this," as if I had volunteered to go to Skinwalker Ranch or something, right? And I hadn't, right? This is different. I think that one of the things I've been lobbying for on Point of Convergence for a while now is that what we conveniently call the UFO phenomenon is actually an amalgam of different kinds of entities, different groups, coming from probably very different origin sources. I think that it's very complex. It's overwhelming for people, because it's one thing to acknowledge that some others are here that are not conventionally human. It's one thing to acknowledge that, but to acknowledge this, like, Pandora's box opening up and all these different kinds of entities from multiple sources is overwhelming for people. But that, when I look at the data, that's what I see. I see what looks to be different groups, different origin sources. And, I talked to you many times about this. In fact, you're the one person in the end that I ever interviewed on Point of Convergence so far. So it's usually always just me giving my sort of solo, audio essay. But the one time I had an interview, it was with you, and we talked about CE5 and the history of CE5. And one of the things we talked about was how, the number of positive experiences, percentage-wise, is well into the high 90s, like 98, 99%, maybe more, right? When you specifically use these protocols, the CE5/heist protocols, and as people know, we want to say heist right along CE5, so people don't think we're talking about Stephen Greer. It's not about Stephen Greer. It's about these protocols, which anyone can do. It's our birthright as humanity. But it's just something we can all do, and if you do it with intentionality and you're reaching out to these ones using these protocols, I have no fear personally. Some people ask me, did you feel, freaked out at all going out and doing this and trying to make contact? And they think about negative things like abduction stories and whatnot, and Skinwalker Ranch. But for me, I wasn't, and never for a moment did I feel any kind of fear, which I would also say, and you and I have talked about this before too, that's a good thing, right? Like if you're going in with too much fear, that can end up priming the experience you end up having with whatever group you end up contacting. So whether you're doing, CE5 heist protocols or astral projection or anything, even lucid dreaming, I would say, be aware of your energy going in. But for me, I went in with a positive kind of expectant kind of, attitude, and had a positive, profound experience as a result.
Right. And you were actually talking about something I actually wanted to get into. But before I mention that, I 100% agree with you. Kind of what you bring to the experience is going to reflect in what happens to a degree. And I'm the same way. Every time that I'm going to go out and do something of like contact work, I'm usually like pretty excited. You know what I mean? At the idea. and to some regard, I've had positive experiences before, so it could create a positive feedback loop in that sense. But yeah, and if you're somebody who's really super worried and concerned about that, maybe you don't want to go do that yet. Maybe you want to do some self work and work on yourself, and to the point, if you ever feel you're ready for it, because if you're going to go out and do something like contact work, you should be ready. And in regards to that, something that me and you have talked about, and which something I'm going to do a video on, I was supposed to before my whole kind of thing happened, is the idea of like spiritual hygiene. And you made that little graphic, which I was going to use for the video, which I still am, which I had to do my own spiritual hygiene process after what just happened. But so can you talk to people about spiritual hygiene? What is that, and what role does it play?
Right. So the first thing I would say is just to give people some background here and some context. I think all of us have experienced going to sleep either angry or upset or anxious or fearful, whatever, worried, and we end up having a dream where some of that energy seems to manifest in the dream. So for instance, for me, I will sometimes use what's called galantamine when I plan to try to induce lucid dreaming. So it's a combination of things. I'll wake up, around 3 o'clock in the morning, meditate, really try to set my intention for what I want to lucid dream. And then, take 2 of these tablets, these galantamine tablets, which number one, they can just make your normal dreams more vivid. And they can also make it more likely that you will have a lucid dream and that you will remember it. So, but when I'm lucid dreaming or when I'm planning to, I go in, I try and, make sure I'm peaceful, that I'm calm, that I'm going in with the intention for a positive experience. So what you're basically doing with spiritual hygiene is just being aware of your energy prior to entering to any of these kind of subtle state activities, whether it's HICE or CU5 or meditation or astral projection or lucid dreaming or any of it, just to be aware that in these subtle states, we seem to inject our own energy into the process, and that ends up being mirrored back to us, echoed back to us. Even in a place like Skinwalker Ranch, some people have suggested that maybe some of the negative experiences have come because military groups went in, or groups went in that were trying to gain intelligence that might turn into a weaponization of some sort, right? So it gives you pause. It makes you aware that, yes, maybe so. Maybe there is something really reflective here in the process. And maybe that's some aspects of the phenomenon trying to teach us something, or maybe it's just a neutral thing that we just get reflected back to us, whatever we put in, at least partially. So spiritual hygiene is about developing self-awareness, first of all, right? You have to be self-aware about these things, these states that you're in. You have to know what it feels like when you're anxious. Like, can you feel this tension in your body? Do you have negative thoughts repeating in your mind? These kind of things are warning signs that you need to do some cleansing work, some shadow work to try and work through that, so that when you go into these different experiences, you're going in clean, you're bringing in positive energy. And that's basically what spiritual hygiene is about, just being self-aware and preparing prior to these experiences.
Yeah, and just so people have a vague idea, I know you can't prescribe everybody one cookie cutter approach, but what are some things that might be involved in spiritual hygiene?
Well, so for instance, if you if it could be something practical, like if you have some sort of outlying disagreement with someone, you might want to go and try and make peace with them. If you are harboring unforgiveness towards someone, then whether or not they're ready to be forgiven or even acknowledge they did something, grant forgiveness for your own kind of cleansing. If you are feeling anxious or negative energy or angry energy, one of the things I always say and that I try and practice is just be with the energy. This is a lot to get into in one session here. This can be a whole course on its own, but yeah, it's really about just being with the energy, letting the energy pass through you. We spend so much of our time trying to resist energy or try to just think about it in terms of thoughts. But at the end of the day, these thoughts are energies, right? That exist in our bodies and in our minds. And so by just learning to relax into it, be with the energy, let it pass through you, you can transmute it into a different kind of energy. You can take an anxious or negative energy and make it positive or neutral. So that takes some practice, and there are courses people can do on that kind of thing, things you can try on your own as well. But again, it begins with self-awareness. It begins with learning to meditate, to sort of zone in on every single aspect of your body. Tune into what's going on in your big toe, in your right foot, kind of thing. Be aware of what that feels like. Go through your entire body, kind of do this survey through your entire body. Then eventually get to your mind. What kind of thoughts are there? So becoming self-aware of it, and then you can sort of transmute some of the energy, clean the energy, so that when you go into these experiences, you're neutral and or positive.
Yeah. So I think the next time I have you on is going to be for Exo Academian spiritual hygiene course.
There you go.
That would be so cool.
Sure.
No, because this is I don't think people realize how incredibly important it is to be, again, this aware and kind of have this idea of spiritual hygiene and balance when you're involving, obviously with life in general, but especially when you're delving into these deeper territories with the phenomenon or even just phenomenology. If you're going to even go practice meditation, if you're not kind of well set, that you could have, an experience in meditation that could be unpleasant if you're not, if you don't have yourself in check to a degree. And I would throw in, even for the spiritual hygiene, that includes, body, mind. So, going for a jog or doing yoga or qigong, those are all things, in my opinion, which can greatly, assist your process, especially if you're somebody who's very kinesthetic, like, body centered. Like for me, I like to work out and stuff. So when I do a body practice, it really dials me in. So, and some people might, playing music might be part of their process. And again, this could all, it sounds kind of like it's approximate or in the proximity, but for me, I've noticed that this is directly involved with my own contact work and even well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say too, just to add to that I think it begins though with us being aware of how our body actually feels. And so many of us have busy lives. We're running around. We don't even realize that we have this insane amount of tension, stored up in our body. So yes, things like yoga can be really helpful to begin to release those tensions. But it begins by becoming more self-aware not just about our thoughts, but also the state of our body, and that's why I say we can use our intention and our attention to focus in on every different segment of your body, be aware of how it feels, and you can actually move energy by doing that. And then you can use things like yoga or working out or whatever, jogging. But it begins by being more, cultivating that self-awareness. So you're aware of your body state and your mind state.
Yeah, that's very Vipassana. Like in a lot of the Vipassana, they'll teach you the second thing they're going to teach you is the body scan.
Absolutely.
So, definitely. So do we have a Exo Academian spiritual hygiene formula? Do we have that formula yet?
No, I'll have to put that together for you. I put that one graphic together for you. But one of the things I am planning on doing in the future that I kind of feel called to do, and again, partly as a culmination of things that have happened synchronistically, but I plan to actually offer courses on a variety of different topics, that being one of them. And so I'm looking forward to, working with people in kind of a course format. So it's not just, them listening to me on a podcast, but actually people would join this course and we would have this kind of interactive, ongoing dialogue and practice around some of these ideas. So everything from, idealism to non-duality to spiritual hygiene. And these are kind of things I want to engage in with people specifically in the future.
I was just going to say you should do a course or something. I swear.
There you go.
I'm looking forward to that. I would definitely participate, man. I'd love to see that.
Cool.
Is there, speaking of the future, right? You just said you're looking at putting together these courses. Do you have any other upcoming projects that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think one thing that I can't say too much about yet, but I will say that I've been working on a project for the last several months. Again, kind of synchronistically came together. an amazing opportunity to work with someone on an amazing, legacy of experience with the phenomenon, and being able to tell that story and bring my sort of perspective that brings, spirituality and the UFO phenomenon and consciousness and all these different elements, the points of convergence that I talk about in my podcast. These are all involved in this particular case. And so I've been able to come alongside and basically work on a book that has to do with telling this story and bringing that to the world. So that's what I'm working on right now, in addition to the other things I'm doing. And that will hopefully be available to people in a few months' time. And I'll have more to say about it later this summer. But that's really exciting. And that's another thing that I'm working on.
Yeah, so I'm going to have you back 2 different times now.
That's right.
One, so I'm surprised you went as far as you did. There's going to be a book, an Exo Academian book. I've actually been hoping that you would do a book. So I mean, I honestly, personally, I hope you do a series of books, because I just love your material, and when people listen to your podcast, they can just see how well organized your thoughts are. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
I appreciate that. And what's funny is I was actually working on a book already of my own, sort of, talking about some of what I've observed and some overarching principles I feel like I've learned about the phenomenon. I was working on that when this other opportunity kind of synchronistically arose. So I've kind of got 2 books going, but the first book's kind of on pause while I work on this opportunity that came up, and I'll pick up the second book once I'm finished with the first.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. And you said this first book that it's the second book, but it's the first book that's going to come out.
Right.
Is going to be out probably in a few months.
Yeah, early fall kind of thing is what we're hoping for.
Wow, you should put it out on like the what is it, the equinox?
There you go.
I just want a question that popped into mind. I know we're coming towards the end now, but I gotta ask. I got Exo Academian on. I gotta ask the question. Why do you think it is that especially with the UFO phenomenon, it's like it is almost like a point of convergence where the UFO phenomenon represents this whole kind of web of high strangeness?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've been saying on the podcast for a while, and by the way, I would say too that, a couple of people have said this to me, and I think it's very true, that in many ways, the Point of Convergence podcast has been my own journey into trying to understand what's going on, not just with the UFO phenomenon, but with psi phenomena, which is really well documented. We have like 150 years of parapsychological research demonstrating that psi phenomena is real and that human beings are just as telepathic as aliens in some ways, or can be at least. It's kind of a dormant potentiality we have. But even when you look at, the double slit experiment and things that are coming out of quantum, theory, that's 100 years old now. When you look at the hard problem of consciousness from a physicalist model, for a long while now, I've had these converging lines of evidence in all these different fields, different but related fields in some ways, because they're all pointing towards basically the structure of reality itself. That to me, it's not a physicalist paradigm, that primarily the world, or what we construct, is not primarily made of matter. That's an epiphenomena of mind stuff or consciousness. And part of the reason why we have these connections, not just with ourselves through telepathy and whatnot, and the sense of being looked at and all these other things that we all experience, deja vu, but also the reason we can have telepathic, connection with these others, the reason we can sometimes see the dead and have experiences with them. I was talking to someone just today about a profound mediumship experience they had, where they were able to connect with their deceased grandma and work through some tension they had in the, when she was alive. So what this tells me is something about reality itself. So that's what I find fascinating. And that's, I would say, primarily where my research is dedicated, is what does this say about reality? What would the structure of reality be that would allow for all these other kind of phenomena that we're seeing across these different fields? So rather than saying, come on, let's try and cookie cutter fit the UFO phenomenon into our current model, I say no. Let's look at the data honestly in all these different fields, see what it's pointing at, and then come up with a conception of reality where that could actually happen.
Yeah, and actually, an interesting note from Dean Radin is that, even if it's on a mild level, the majority of people have these experiences. Again, even if it's mild, there might be some people who are exceptionally gifted, but the majority of people will have some kind of mild telepathy or clairvoyant.
Right. To the point where he said when he did that one experiment trying to look into this more, he found it almost impossible to find someone that either themselves or in their family hadn't had these kind of psi experiences, right? In other words, yeah, it's absolutely much more the norm. It's the exception to the rule when you find someone in a group that doesn't have this in their background. And that led him to some interesting, observations about things like witch burning and, religious groups coming down and persecuting various sort of psi activities in the past in certain parts of the world, and how that produced certain kinds of genetic lines that are more inclined to this than others. So it's really interesting. There is a genetic link, but absolutely, you're right that the majority of people actually do experience this.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of even an important part of what's going on now when we're seeing the stigma of UFOs, slowly dissolving, no matter how many people come kicking and screaming in the process. Even though I think most people are kind of like, wow, I can believe in UFOs or entertain the idea at least. I think one of the next stigmas that has to really fall is the one against the, psychic phenomenon and all those ideas. And I think, the UFO phenomenon and so-called disclosure is a catalyst for those future stigmas to kind of dissolve into this new way of seeing reality.
Absolutely. And, again, just to highlight to people, if in case it's not clear, the evidence is already there. The data already exists in all these different fields. I mean, quantum observations made 100 years ago, parapsychological research, it's been around for 150 years, UFO phenomenon, that's existed for decades and decades and decades. The evidence is there. That's not the question. It's that just like, religious history, when you have a certain meta narrative that the society believes in conventionally, like the physicalist model, which says this stuff shouldn't exist, right? This stuff shouldn't be possible. It takes a while for that to sink in and create enough dissonance in the society where the society is really willing to reimagine reality itself. Because in the process, you go through that middle stage where you're not sure what reality is anymore. And that's disconcerting for a lot of people, frankly. For you and I, we've been at this for a while now, so it's old hat for us. But for some people, it's going to be overwhelming because, like you say, with disclosure, it's not just about aliens are here, but what reality is considerably different than what we've been taught.
Yeah. And, I could speak to you all day, but I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have a first name? Are we going to get your first name, or are you saving that for something else?
All right, James, since it's you, I will do it. My first name given at birth is actually not Exo, which will be shocking to many people. Yes. My first name actually is Darren.
Oh, I was going to say Mike. Yeah,
no,
Darren.
Not Mike and not Exo. It's Darren. So, hi, everybody. I'm Darren. You can call me that from now on.
I'm going to call him Darren Academian. Or you know what though? I love Exo. I've been calling you Exo for so long, so that I'm just used to it now.
Yeah, it's funny. Even when I would talk to you, even after I had told you my name, you kept calling me Exo. So I'm guessing it was just old hat for you.
I like it. It's a cool handle. But again, it's an honor to have you give your first video interview here and kind of present yourself to the world. So I'm really grateful for that, and I'm always grateful to have you on and to have these kind of conversations with you. And I'm looking forward to many more. But for people listening again, where can they find your work?
So I have a couple different podcasts I'm involved in. I have my Point of Convergence podcast, which you can find on my YouTube channel, which is Exo Academian. So I have my Point of Convergence podcast posted there on my YouTube channel, as well as all the usual, podcast platforms. You can find it there, Point of Convergence. And then also with my co-host Nathan, which is also AKA a Waif Soul. We have a podcast we call Liminal Frames, where we talk about not just the UFO phenomenon, but all these other aspects that we talked about tonight, and as well as religious history and how that plays in and all that as well, because both Nathan and I have a background in that. So that's called Liminal Frames. You can find those episodes also on my Exo Academian YouTube channel, but it's also its own dedicated podcast. So if you want to listen to Liminal Frames on a podcast network, you want to find that on your podcast platform of choice. And just heads up, it's Liminal Frames, frames spelled PH as in phenomenon. So frames with a PH. And I'm on Twitter, Exo Academian, and on Facebook as well. So hit me up on there as well.
Yeah, and I'm really anticipating the announcement and the release for the book coming up. So everybody stay tuned for that, and stay tuned on Exo Academian's Twitter account. He's always on there posting. But again, thank you so much for coming on, Exo or Darren, and I'll speak to you again very soon.
James, I'm happy to be here. You're the first person I'd want to do this with. And when the book comes out or when we're ready to talk about it, you'll be the first person I talk with as well.
And I hope I can get a signed copy.
Absolutely. In person.
Yeah, seriously. And right. Oh yeah, for sure. And thank you so much, man. I'll speak to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, James. Bye.
Take care.